Well, it challenges conventions by using a split screen, which gives it a double ending or a cliffhanger, and also because there's a lack of speech, because I found that it ruined the narrative if the actress couldn't show any emotion, something I picked up from other short films I looked at, and previous work from my own opening sequence dating Daisy. It develops by the use of words out of alphabet spaghetti to show how Charlotte was feeling, to make it more obvious because there was only 5 minutes to convey lots of emotions. And it used titles that were included in the action of the shot. For example, in the beginning, Charlotte is writing on paper and the title "I Exist" appears on screen as if it is being written. And when the mother, Tracy, is turning around, her name disappears behind her. Audiences always say in audience feedback that they like titles to be included with the action of the shot rather than just being stationary. It uses conventions because it's set in a small town. It uses a child protagonist, just like Billy Elliot or East is East, which include mainly child actors. And it reflects a British culture by use of school uniform, the housing environment, which allows my target audience to relate to the protagonist more, as I presume being a British film, that most of the audience members will be from a British culture. It also focuses on a controversial issue, not necessarily child abuse, but neglecting a child. The poster and the short film are aimed at 12 to 16-year-olds, the target audience, but the review is aimed at 15 to 16-year-olds from the target audience, so the older end that could understand it more, and parents of the children that are going to watch it. For my review, I used a combination of language styles similar to that of Sight and Sound and Empire, but I combined the two because audiences that watch my film won't necessarily understand the language from a review from Sight and Sound. All three of my final pieces serve a similar purpose, to bring as many audience members as possible. The poster is only glanced at, so I had to make it stand out. I used a tool that cut around Charlotte on Paint Shop Pro and blurred the background, and I used a white title, and also I put names on there so that if people recognise the names it might draw them in to watch it. But the review is something that people usually look for in a magazine to see if the film is good, to get a little bit of a reliable opinion on the film. The title of my short film I made in live type, and I used a specific font that looked as if it was being written because Beth was writing at the time. However, on my poster I've used just a block white title where the letters inside are removed, and that's to show how lonely she's feeling and alone, and the fact that the title doesn't exist is quite ironic. So they're not the same font, they're not drawn together, but they do work together to convey the emotions that she is feeling. The genre is shown well through the photos that I used on my poster, showing the struggles that Charlotte was facing. And the texts that I researched to help me produce my final product include short films on YouTube, such as Motion and Love at First Type. Love at First Type, the voiceover completely ruined it as actors spoke in monotone, so that's why I decided to use no speech. And Motion was much more effective by just using actions rather than speech. It's kind of a big metaphor. They both had social realism factors about them. They both looked at controversial issues. However, Love at First Type was more of a rom-com, and Motion had horror elements. The methods of gaining audience feedback that I used to help me make my decisions were multiple questionnaires and asking people to watch my short film, followed by answering some questions. From taking out questionnaires, I learned to ask only questions that I didn't already have the answer to, or only ones that I had ideas about. So I asked questions such as what title best suits the film blurb above, and then gave multiple choice answers, as questionnaires which require long written answers usually generate only 1 or 2 word answers from the people asked. This question helped me to decide which title would draw more audience members in, as my target audience chose which they liked best, being I Exist. My questionnaire results were a reliable source of getting responses, because I asked people from the ages of 12 to 16, my target audience, and a few outside my target audience, just to get a wider view. Asking people to watch my short film was not as helpful, as I had to ask people from my target audience. Number one, they're not media students, so they wouldn't know what they were looking for. And number two, the people I asked were friends of mine, and they found it hard to be critical of my work for fear of not wanting to upset me. Audience members that I asked would not be watching my film, according to Blumler and Kat, for diversion and escape for personal relationships. Instead, they will be watching for personal identity and surveillance, as I Exist is designed for audiences to relate to the protagonist and for parents watching with their children to ask themselves questions about their own lives. I use blogs for research and planning. They allow me to collaborate video clips from YouTube, screenshots, photographs, images off the internet and sound. I use YouTube clips of short films alongside textual analyses of them to back up my writing. This allowed me not to have to explain every section of the clips. I just had to state the times or give small explanations. I used screenshots to show how my ideas were developing, which was 100 times easier than explaining what everything looked like. I could instead show what it looked like. This was also good because I could annotate around the edge of the screenshots. Research was primarily done on the internet, as well as questionnaires. The blog was also on the internet, so it's easy to add things at the same time. They was all in one place. Looking at ideas from previous texts I use on the websites such as YouTube and Vimeo, and also smaller sites such as Small, which was the most useful because it had a wide variety of successful and unsuccessful pieces that I was able to compare. YouTube just had so many short films, it was hard to find ones that were suitable to look at, to deconstruct for the genre I was looking at. During the construction stages I used a simple Canon video camera and Final Cut Express on the Apple Mac computers. The only limitation from using the video camera was that it wasn't waterproof, so I couldn't use it in the rain, which would have been an example of pathetic fallacy in my film, showing how Beth felt through the use of weather, rather than speech again. The main difficulty I found was filming in public places because people walked in front of the camera at crucial points, so I'd have to refilm shots again and again. For the editing stage I used techniques such as split screen, which was overlaying two shots together and then using a wireframe to adjust the sizes. This enabled me to give my narrative two available endings, a sort of postmodern aspect to it, and also leaving it on a cliffhanger, which I decided I wanted to do after being inspired by the short film I looked at called Motion. I found the editing difficult at times as I was trying to create match on action a lot of times, and I couldn't cut them at the same time, so although it was meant to be continuity editing, it really didn't look as smooth as it should have done.